Have you ever walked into a room, looked around, and completely forgotten why you came in? Yeah? Okay, now imagine telling your friend about it, and instead of saying, ha 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 ha, yeah, that happens to me all the time, they look you dead in the eye and say, wow, you've been forgetting things a lot lately. Are you sure you're okay? I mean, you do forget things pretty often. And suddenly you start questioning yourself. Wait, do I actually forget things a lot? Am I losing it? Well, congratulations. You just got a tiny taste of what gaslighting feels like. Gaslighting isn't just a weird word people throw around in movies or on Twitter. It's actually one of the sneakiest, most dangerous forms of emotional manipulation out there. And chances are you've either seen it, experienced it, or maybe accidentally done a little baby version of it yourself without realizing. Here's the wild thing. Gaslighting doesn't usually start like in the movies. Some supervillain twisting their mustache saying, I will now gaslight you. Nope, it often starts small. Tiny little comments, subtle doubts, and before you know it, a person starts questioning their own reality. Most of us think manipulation looks obvious, like someone yelling at you or forcing you to do something. But gaslighting is a way sneakier because it hides behind normal conversations. It sounds like, relax, you're overreacting. That never happened. You're so sensitive, it was just a joke. Now, if you've ever said stuff like that casually, don't panic. Context matters. Sometimes people say these things in a playful, harmless way. But when these phrases are used consistently, with the intention of making someone doubt their feelings, memories, or even their sanity, that's gaslighting. Okay, but where did this weird word even come from? Fun fact, gaslighting comes from a 1938 play called Gaslight, later turned into a movie. In the story, a husband keeps dimming the gas-powered lights in the house and then tells his wife she's imagining it. Over time, she starts thinking she's going crazy. Creepy, right? But super effective as a metaphor. At its core, gaslighting is all about control. It's about making someone doubt themselves so much that they stop trusting their own thoughts, memories, and feelings. And when that happens, guess who they start depending on for the truth? Yep, the gaslighter. Let's make it super simple. Imagine reality is like a puzzle. Every experience you have is like a little puzzle piece. Gaslighting is when someone sneaks in while you're not looking, takes some of your pieces, swaps them around, or tells you those pieces never existed in the first place. And now you're sitting there staring at this messed up puzzle thinking, wow, maybe I just suck at puzzles. And here's why this is such a big deal. Gaslighting isn't always loud. It isn't always dramatic. In fact, it's often boring. It happens over time, in relationships, at work, in friendships, even in families. Slowly, the person being gaslit starts saying things like, I'm probably just overthinking. Maybe I am too emotional. I guess I do remember that wrong. And little by little, their confidence gets chipped away. But here's the tricky part. A lot of people don't realize it's happening until much later, because gaslighting makes you doubt the one thing you should always trust, yourself. Now let's clear something up. Not every argument or disagreement is gaslighting. Humans mess up all the time. People remember things differently. People get defensive. That's normal. Gaslighting becomes a problem when one person consistently uses denial, blame shifting, or twisting reality to control another person's thoughts or feelings. So how can you tell if you're being gaslit? Here are a few signs. You constantly second-guess yourself. You feel confused or even crazy in the presence of someone. You often apologize even when you're not sure you did anything wrong. You feel like nothing you do is ever good enough. You find yourself making excuses for someone's bad behavior. If that sounds familiar, first of all, you're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. Awareness is the first step to breaking free from gaslighting. The moment you start recognizing those subtle manipulation tactics is the moment you take back some power. Talk to trusted friends. Write things down so you can look back later and see patterns. Set boundaries. And remember, your feelings, your memories, and your experiences are valid. Because gaslighting only works if you start believing that someone else knows your reality better than you do. Spoiler alert, they don't. At the end of the day, You are the main character in your life, not a side character in someone else's twisted version of your story. And the more you learn to trust your voice, your memories, and your instincts, the harder it becomes for anyone to dim your light, even if they keep messing with the gas. Have you ever said no to someone, totally reasonably, totally politely, and then immediately felt like the worst human being alive? Like you're suddenly the villain in someone else's life story just because you didn't lend them $30, didn't come to their party, or didn't reply to their text in 0.3 seconds? Picture this. Your friend asks you, "Hey, can you help me move this weekend?" And you, having already planned a relaxing weekend binge-watching Netflix in your pajamas, say, "Sorry, I actually just wanted to rest this weekend." And then, boom, here it comes. Wow, must be nice to have all that free time to yourself. Not everyone has that luxury, you know. But it's fine. I'll figure it out, somehow. Yes, the ancient art of guilt tripping, so subtle, so effective, and so incredibly annoying. But here's the thing. Guilt tripping happens way more often than we realize. It happens in families, friendships, workplaces, even romantic relationships. And a lot of the time, people don't even notice it's happening because it hides under this weird little mask of caring or just being honest. See, most of us were raised to think that feeling guilty means we did something wrong. Like guilt is this alarm system going off in your brain telling you, "Hey, fix this, be better." But guilt tripping plays with that feeling in a super sneaky way. Instead of letting you decide for yourself if you actually did something wrong, a guilt trip hands you that guilt, like an unwanted gift you didn't ask for, but somehow still feel obligated to accept. And the reason guilt tripping works so well? Simple. Nobody likes being seen as selfish, unkind, or ungrateful. We all want to be good people. We all want to help, and guilt trippers know this. They count on it. So what exactly is guilt tripping? Basically, guilt tripping is when someone tries to make you feel bad so you'll do what they want. Instead of directly asking for what they need or expressing how they really feel, they throw little emotional darts coated in guilt. Sometimes it's obvious, like, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me." Other times it's super passive-aggressive, like, "Oh, don't worry about me. I'll just sit here, alone, in the dark, starving." It's emotional manipulation, plain and simple, and it's powerful because it makes you feel responsible for their feelings. But here's the plot twist. Feeling guilty doesn't automatically mean you've done something wrong. That's the tricky part people often forget. Guilt is just a feeling, and feelings aren't always facts. Think about it like this. If I gave you a random bill and said, "Hey, you owe me this money," would you just pay it without asking why? Hopefully not. But that's exactly what happens emotionally during a guilt trip. Someone hands you a guilt bill, and without thinking, a lot of us just emotionally pay it by saying yes, giving in, or sacrificing our own needs. Now, here's where it gets even messier. Guilt tripping doesn't always come from bad people or evil masterminds twirling their mustaches. Most guilt tripping actually comes from people who feel powerless or hurt themselves. Maybe your mom guilt trips you because she's scared of losing her connection with you. Maybe your friend guilt trips you because they feel lonely or abandoned. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but understanding it helps you respond better. So, what do you do about guilt tripping? First, recognize it. If someone's words leave you feeling bad without a clear reason, like you feel more confused or heavy than actually accountable, pause and ask yourself, wait, is this guilt really mine to carry? Second, respond kindly but firmly. Something like, "I understand you're upset, but I'm allowed to say no without feeling guilty." Or even just setting a boundary like, "I care about you, but I can't take responsibility for how you feel about my decision." And third, don't guilt trip others. It's tempting sometimes. We've all probably done it at some point, dropping a dramatic, "must be nice," or "wow, okay then," when we feel disappointed. But real connection happens through honest communication, not emotional manipulation. At the end of the day, healthy relationships are built on respect, not guilt. If someone really cares about you, they won't want you to help them out of fear or pressure. They'll want you to help because you choose to. So the next time someone tries to hit you with a guilt trip, Remember this, guilt is a feeling, not a fact. And you are allowed to set boundaries, protect your peace, and say no without carrying the emotional bill for someone else's feelings. Because honestly, being kind doesn't mean being controlled. And if anybody tries to make you feel bad about that, well, tell them I said nice try. You know that feeling when you download a new mobile game, and for the first few minutes, it's amazing? You're leveling up like crazy, getting free coins every 5 seconds, daily gifts just for showing up. You're basically a gaming god. But then, after a while, the gifts slow down, the coins stop flowing, and suddenly, if you want to keep feeling special, you gotta pay up. Yeah, dating can sometimes feel exactly like that. Let me paint you a picture. You meet someone new, they're charming, funny. They text you good morning and good night every single day. They send long paragraphs about how you're the most beautiful, most amazing person they've ever met. Flowers delivered to your house, cute little surprises, random just thinking of you playlists. They want to see you all the time. They say stuff like, I've never felt this way about anyone before, and it's only been like 3 days. At first it feels like a dream, like something out of a movie. And let's be real, we all love attention. We all love feeling special. It feels good to be chosen, adored, obsessed over. But here's the tricky part. Sometimes that dream feeling isn't love. Sometimes it's a trap. See, most of us are taught to believe that when someone goes all out for us, it must mean it's real love. We watch K-dramas, rom-coms, and cheesy love songs that tell us, if they wanted to, they would. So when someone does when they go all out, super fast, it's really easy to think, wow, this is it. This is what love is supposed to feel like. And don't get me wrong, grand romantic gestures aren't bad. Giving someone attention isn't bad. But there's a big difference between genuine love and love bombing. So what is love bombing? Love bombing is when someone overwhelms you with excessive affection, attention, gifts, and praise way too quickly, not because they genuinely love you, but because they want to control you or rush you into trusting them. It's like emotional fast-forwarding. And the thing is, it feels good at first. That's exactly why it works. Think about it like fishing. The love bomber is the fisherman. The compliments, gifts, constant attention, that's the bait. And you're the fish, feeling flattered, special, and thinking, wow, I've never felt this safe in love before. But once you bite, once you're hooked, that's when things start to change. Suddenly, that 24/7 attention becomes possessiveness. The constant texting turns into, why didn't you reply sooner? The gifts come with strings attached. The sweet words turn into guilt trips or jealousy. The same person who said, you're perfect last week is now saying, I don't like when you hang out with your friends without me. See what just happened? That's the dark side of love bombing. It's not about loving you, it's about making you dependent on them. It's about creating an emotional high so that when they pull away or when they start controlling you, you're too attached to leave easily. It's manipulation disguised as romance. And here's the thing, a lot of people don't even realize it's happening because we're so used to equating love with intensity. We're told when you know, or real love moves fast. But healthy love, real love, it builds over time. It grows through trust, respect, and consistency, not emotional fireworks on day 2. So how can you tell if someone's love bombing you? Well, ask yourself, is this moving way faster than I'm comfortable with? Do I feel like I can say no to them without them getting upset? Does this person respect my boundaries? Or do I feel overwhelmed, pressured, or even guilty for needing space? Healthy love feels safe, it feels calm, it gives you room to breathe. Love bombing, on the other hand, feels like riding a roller coaster that you never actually agreed to get on. And here's the biggest giveaway of all. If someone really loves you, they'll have no problem taking things slow. They won't need to rush you or overwhelm you with attention just to win you. Because real love isn't a game. It's not about baiting you, trapping you, or controlling you. It's about growing together one step at a time. So next time someone shows up in your life with grand declarations of love out of nowhere, after knowing you for like 2 days, take a step back. Ask yourself, Is this love or is this just a lot of noise? Because love should feel good, but it should also feel real. And anything real doesn't need to rush. Not even in the movies. Have you ever texted someone and watched those little gray message bubbles just sit there forever? No reply, no reaction. Not even a pathetic scene mark, just silence. At first you tell yourself, maybe they're busy. Then hours pass. Maybe their phone died. Then days pass. And now you're spiraling. Maybe I accidentally offended them. Or maybe they hate me. Or maybe I am the worst human alive. Yeah, we've all been there. Silence can be louder than words. And honestly, nothing messes with your brain more than when someone who used to talk to you every day suddenly goes full ghost mode, like they've joined a secret witness protection program just to avoid you. But let's be real, we all kind of know what that feels like, whether it's in friendships, relationships, or even family. Maybe it's that awkward fight with your sibling where you both walk around the house like strangers. Or that cold war with your partner after an argument where both of you are just breathing angrily in separate rooms. Or maybe it's your parents saying, "I'm not mad, I'm disappointed," and then not talking to you for 3 days straight. Most people assume the silent treatment is just a dramatic way of saying, "I'm mad at you," without actually saying it. But here's the thing. Sometimes it's more than just cooling off or needing space. Sometimes it's a form of emotional manipulation. Now, don't get me wrong, everyone needs alone time once in a while. Healthy space is normal, but the silent treatment, that's different. That's not about cooling down. That's about control. Silent treatment happens when someone deliberately ignores, withholds communication, or freezes you out as a way to punish you, guilt trip you, or make you feel powerless. It's like emotional stonewalling. And the worst part, it puts all the emotional weight on the other person. See, here's why it messes with your head. When someone gives you the silent treatment, your brain starts working overtime to fill in the silence. You replay every conversation, you second-guess yourself, you wonder, what did I do wrong? Even if you know deep down you didn't do anything that bad, the silence feels like proof that you're somehow the bad guy. And that's exactly why the silent treatment can be so effective. Not because it solves problems, but because it creates fear, anxiety, and self-doubt. It shifts the focus away from the original issue and makes you so desperate for connection again, you might end up apologizing for things that weren't even your fault. Pretty sneaky, right? And what makes this tricky is that a lot of people don't realize when they're on the receiving end of it, or worse, when they're using it themselves. Because culture sometimes romanticizes silence as strength. We hear stuff like, "Silence speaks louder than words," or "Just ignore them, that'll teach them." But silence used as a weapon is not strength, it's avoidance. Now let me break it down super simply. Silent treatment means intentional ignoring to punish or control someone. Healthy space can be something like, "Hey, I need a little time to cool off, but I care about you, and we'll talk later." See the difference? One communicates boundaries with love, the other leaves you guessing and hurting. And honestly, we've probably all given the silent treatment at some point in our lives, maybe out of frustration, hurt, or just not knowing how to express what we feel. But here's the thing. Silence doesn't solve the problem. It just delays it, and often makes it worse. Real communication sounds more like, "I'm upset right now, and I need space, but I still care about this relationship." That way, the other person isn't left in emotional limbo, questioning their entire existence. On the flip side, if you're someone getting the silent treatment regularly, and it makes you feel small, anxious, or afraid, that's a big red flag. Healthy relationships are built on communication, not confusion. Nobody deserves to feel invisible as punishment. And sure, we all need breaks sometimes. We all need to cool off. But if someone is using silence against you to manipulate your emotions, avoid accountability, or force you into submission, that's not love, and that's not respect. That's control. So next time you catch yourself in the middle of a silent treatment standoff, ask yourself, is this helping us heal? Or is this just hurting us more? Because real connection doesn't sound like silence. It sounds like honesty, kindness, and yes, even awkward, messy conversations. At the end of the day, words are how we reach each other. Words are how we repair. And silence? Well, silence should never be louder than love. You know what's awkward? Group chats. Specifically, when two of your friends are low-key fighting, but instead of talking to each other like normal human beings, they both start privately messaging you about it. Suddenly, you're not just scrolling memes anymore. You've been promoted, without pay, might I add, to unofficial therapist messenger and accidental drama coordinator. Friend A is like, can you believe what friend B did? Total betrayal. And then friend B is texting you 2 seconds later like, wow, did friend A seriously say that about me? And you're just sitting there holding your phone like, why am I in this episode of Real Housewives? But here's the thing. This little scenario isn't just annoying. It's actually a super common tactic people use when they want to control a situation without dealing with it directly. And in the world of psychology, this sneaky little move has a name: triangulation. Now, the funny thing is, most people have either done this or been caught in the middle of it without even realizing. Sometimes it's innocent. Like a kid telling mom, Dad said I could eat ice cream, when, Dad absolutely did not say that. Or siblings playing parents against each other. Classic chaos. But in other situations, especially in toxic relationships, friendships, or even at work, triangulation can actually become pretty manipulative. And what's wild is that most of us don't see it coming, because it doesn't always look obvious or dramatic. It often shows up in small, sneaky, everyday ways. Like, let's say you and your partner have a disagreement. Instead of talking directly to you, they run to their best friend or their mom and tell their version of the story, painting themselves as the victim. And later you find out that everyone's looking at you like you're the villain in a movie you didn't even know you were starring in. Or maybe at work, a coworker complains about you to the boss without bringing it up to you first. Now the boss is suddenly acting weird around you, and you're left wondering what you did wrong. Spoiler alert, you just got triangulated. So what exactly is triangulation? In simple terms, triangulation is when someone pulls a third person into a conflict, not to resolve it, but to create confusion, control the situation, or avoid accountability. Instead of communicating directly, they start playing sides, spreading information selectively, or using other people as messengers to send signals without actually having to face the issue head-on. Think of it like emotional chess, but instead of moving pieces, they're moving people. And let me tell you, being caught in the middle of triangulation feels exactly like being that one friend stuck between two arguing people on Facebook, just there for memes and suddenly getting tagged into a 300 comment argument about something you didn't even witness. A lot of people struggle to recognize triangulation because it's disguised as venting, just sharing feelings, or getting advice. But the real giveaway is this: the purpose isn't resolution, it's control. The person using triangulation isn't trying to solve the problem. They're trying to control how others see the problem, and more importantly, how others see you. This is why triangulation can feel so isolating and stressful. It divides people. It breaks trust. It creates sides where there don't need to be sides. And worst of all, it often leaves the person being targeted feeling confused, defensive, and alone. But here's the good news. Once you can recognize it, you can start stepping out of the triangle. If you realize you're being used as the middleman, the best response is simple. Encourage direct communication. Tell them, hey, I think you should talk to them directly about this. Don't take the bait. Don't spread messages. Don't pick sides in a game you didn't sign up for. And if you notice someone is triangulating against you, stay calm. Don't let it pull you into defensiveness or gossip wars. Instead, address the person directly and respectfully. Set boundaries. Be clear. And most importantly, don't let their triangle trap you. At the end of the day, healthy communication doesn't need triangles. It needs honesty, respect, and adults willing to have awkward but real conversations without needing to drag in an audience. Because life's already complicated enough without turning every disagreement into a weird, messy group project nobody asked for. So, next time you find yourself in the middle of other people's drama, Just remember, you're not a chess piece, you're not a messenger pigeon, and you're definitely not a character in their soap opera. Politely step out of the triangle and go enjoy your ice cream in peace. Have you ever met someone who accuses you of doing exactly what they are doing? Like you catch them being shady, lying, or acting weird, but somehow, 5 minutes later, you're the villain of the story. Suddenly they're saying things like, "Wow, I can't believe you don't trust me. You're probably the one hiding things." And you're just standing there like, "Wait, what just happened?" It's like when you were a kid and your sibling broke something in the house, but before your parents even find out, they come running to mom like, "Mom, guess what? I think they broke your favorite mug, and now you're grounded for a crime you didn't even commit." Classic move. Honestly, that's projection in action. Now here's the funny part. Projection happens way more in adult life than most people realize. We just don't always catch it. In fact, most of us have either been victims of it or accidentally done it ourselves. Think about how common this is in relationships. You know when a super jealous boyfriend keeps accusing his girlfriend of cheating, but turns out he's the one sneaking around? Or maybe a friend is constantly calling everyone else fake or two-faced, but somehow they're the ones gossiping and stirring drama in every group chat. Weird coincidence, right? Or here's a really relatable one. Ever worked with a boss or a coworker who's super disorganized, constantly late, and never meets deadlines? But then they call you out in front of everyone like, "Some people really need to learn time management." Like, "Sir, be serious." What's wild is that projection is so sneaky because it often comes from a blind spot. People usually aren't sitting there thinking, I know I'm lying, so I'll accuse someone else to distract them. No, most of the time, projection happens when someone is uncomfortable with their own thoughts, feelings, or behaviors. So instead of dealing with that discomfort, their brain kind of shoves it onto someone else like a hot potato. Not my problem. Must be yours. So what exactly is projection? In simple terms, projection is when someone takes something they're feeling internally, like guilt, shame, insecurity, anger, or fear, and throws it onto another person. Psychologists explain that it's a defense mechanism, kind of like an emotional reflex. Instead of facing their own flaws or uncomfortable feelings, a person projects them outward, blaming someone else or accusing them of doing the very thing they can't admit about themselves. It's like their brain is holding up a giant emotional mirror, but instead of seeing their own reflection, they insist it's your face staring back at them. And it's not always dramatic or toxic. Sometimes projection shows up in super small, everyday ways, like when someone who's secretly nervous about being liked accuses you of being desperate for attention, or when someone who's feeling super overwhelmed lashes out and says, "Oh, why are you so stressed all the time?" But here's the tricky part. Projection messes with our heads because it makes us doubt ourselves. You might walk away from a conversation thinking, "Wait, was I being selfish? Am I the insecure one? Did I actually do something wrong?" And suddenly you're carrying emotions that aren't even yours to begin with. That's why it's so important to recognize projection when it happens. It protects your peace and helps you avoid getting dragged into someone else's emotional baggage. One simple trick to spot projection is to look for over-the-top accusations that feel out of left field, especially if they don't match your behavior at all. Like if you're being super open and honest in a conversation, but the other person keeps accusing you of lying or hiding things, that might be projection. Another clue, it often feels really unfair or confusing. You'll walk away from the interaction replaying it over and over, thinking, "That was weird. That didn't feel like it was about me." And chances are it wasn't. But here's the plot twist. We all project sometimes. Yup, even you, even me. It happens when we're stressed, defensive, or feeling super vulnerable. The key is to catch yourself doing it. Maybe you're annoyed at someone for being lazy, but really, you've been procrastinating all week. Or you accuse someone of being rude, when deep down you know you snapped at them first. That's human. But emotional growth starts when we notice these patterns and ask ourselves, wait, is this really about them, or is this about me? At the end of the day, projection is like emotional junk mail. It gets sent your way, but that doesn't mean you have to open it or take it personally. Recognizing projection helps you set boundaries, protect your mental space, and stay grounded in who you really are, not who someone else projects you to be. And next time someone accuses you of something totally random or unfair, just smile to yourself and think, ah, classic projection. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Have you ever been caught doing something wrong? And your very first instinct was to say, well, it wasn't really my fault. Yeah, same. That's blame shifting. And honestly, we have all done it at some point. Blame shifting is one of those sneaky little habits that shows up in everyday life way more than we realize. It happens at school, at work, in relationships, in families, literally anywhere people interact. Blame shifting is exactly what it sounds like. It's when someone tries to avoid responsibility for something they did by shifting the blame onto someone or something else. It's like playing hot potato, but with guilt. Nobody wants to hold on to it, so they throw it at the nearest person they can find. Now, here's the thing. Blame shifting isn't always loud or dramatic. Sure, sometimes it looks like a kid yelling, "My brother told me to do it," when they're caught drawing on the wall. But other times, it's way more subtle. Like when a coworker forgets to send an email and says, "Well, I didn't get the info from you soon enough." Or when someone's late to a meeting and says, "Traffic was crazy," even though they totally could have left earlier. Sometimes blame shifting is even kind of sneaky because it feels like a defense mechanism. Nobody likes to feel like the bad guy. Nobody likes to admit they messed up. So when we feel that little sting of guilt or embarrassment, our brains try to protect us by going, "Wait, hang on a second. This wasn't totally my fault." And that's when the blame shifting begins. But here's where it gets interesting. Blame shifting doesn't just protect our egos. It also creates a pattern. And the more we do it, the easier it becomes to avoid taking responsibility for anything. Over time, that's a problem. Because if we're always shifting the blame away from ourselves, we're not really learning from our mistakes. We're not growing. We're just dodging accountability. And honestly, it can start to drive people around us kind of crazy. Think about it. Imagine you have a friend who never owns up to anything. Every time something goes wrong, it's somebody else's fault. Their teacher is unfair, their boss is impossible, their ex was totally crazy. It's never them. After a while, hanging out with that person gets exhausting, right? Because deep down, we all respect people who can say, "Yeah, I messed that up. That one's on me." It's simple, it's honest, and it's actually kind of refreshing. But blame shifting doesn't only show up in personal situations. It happens a lot in bigger systems too. Companies do it. Politicians do it. Celebrities do it. You'll hear phrases like, "mistakes were made," instead of, "we made a mistake." It's a clever little language trick that shifts blame away from the people in charge and makes problems feel like they just happened on their own somehow. Like mistakes just fell out of the sky. Weird, right? And while that might help save face in the moment, it doesn't really build trust, because people can usually tell when someone is dodging responsibility. And if it keeps happening, it chips away at credibility. Now, does that mean we should always blame ourselves for everything that goes wrong? Of course not. There's a difference between taking responsibility and taking the blame for things that aren't your fault. If your coworker didn't send you that file like they promised, that's not on you. If your friend keeps canceling plans last minute, that's on them. But when we mess up, and let's be real, everyone does, it actually feels kind of powerful to just own it. Saying something like, "Hey, I dropped the ball on that. I'll fix it," shows maturity. It shows confidence. And it shows respect for the people around us. The cool thing is, once you start practicing accountability, blame shifting becomes less tempting. You realize that messing up isn't the end of the world. In fact, mistakes are usually where the best lessons live, and people will often appreciate your honesty way more than a perfectly crafted excuse. And here's a fun little bonus. When you stop shifting blame, you also stop wasting energy defending yourself all the time. You get to spend that energy actually fixing things, learning new skills, and building stronger relationships. So the next time you feel that little panic rising up, that moment where your brain is like, "Quick, blame literally anyone else," try pausing for a second. Ask yourself, okay, but what part of this is on me? And if there's something there, just own it. It might feel a little uncomfortable at first, But over time, it gets easier. And honestly, it feels kind of good. Because at the end of the day, being human means making mistakes. But being a decent human? That's about owning them. Have you ever known someone who always seems to be the victim no matter what happens? Like no matter what they did or how things actually went down, somehow they always find a way to twist the story so that they come out looking like the poor, helpless person who got wronged by everybody else? Yeah, that's what we're talking about today, playing the victim. Now let me be super clear right from the start. There are real victims in this world. People go through hard things. People get hurt, mistreated, and taken advantage of. That's not what we're talking about here. What we are talking about is when someone chooses to act like a victim in situations where they really aren't one, all to avoid responsibility, gain sympathy, or even manipulate other people. Playing the victim is a form of emotional manipulation, and it's a lot more common than most of us realize. It happens in relationships, in families, in the workplace, in friendships, pretty much anywhere people interact. And sometimes it can be so sneaky and so subtle that you don't even realize it's happening until you're knee-deep in guilt for something you didn't even do. Here's what playing the victim often looks like in real life. Let's say someone hurt your feelings. Maybe they said something rude or did something unfair. So you calmly tell them how you feel. Instead of apologizing or owning up to their behavior, they suddenly flip the script. Now they are the one who's hurt. They are upset. They start saying things like, "I can't believe you would accuse me of that. After everything I've done for you? Wow, I guess I'm just a terrible person, huh?" Sound familiar? That's classic victim-playing behavior. Instead of focusing on the actual problem, they've made the conversation all about how wounded they are. And the wild part? Now you're comforting them, you're backtracking, you're reassuring them that you didn't mean to upset them. And just like that, your original concern gets completely buried. Another way people play the victim is by refusing to take responsibility for their actions. Maybe they messed up at work or forgot something important or treated someone badly. But instead of saying, "Yeah, that's on me," they blame everything else. They blame stress. They blame their childhood. They blame the weather. They might even blame you. For example, they might say something like, "Well, if you hadn't been so demanding, I wouldn't have reacted that way." In other words, it's never their fault. They are always just reacting to the terrible things other people are supposedly doing to them. And here's the thing. Playing the victim can actually be pretty powerful because most people don't want to hurt others. Most of us are kind. We care. We feel bad if we think we've upset someone. People who play the victim know this. They count on it. They know that by acting wounded or fragile, they can control the situation and avoid being held accountable. Now, why do people do this? Well, there are a few possible reasons. Some people grew up in environments where playing the victim was the only way they got attention or care. For others, it's a defense mechanism, a way to protect their ego or avoid feeling guilt or shame. And for some, sadly, it's just a manipulation tactic they've learned works really well for getting their way. But regardless of the reason, the result is the same. Playing the victim shifts attention away from their behavior and puts the spotlight on their supposed suffering. It confuses people. It makes them feel guilty, and it often leaves the real issues completely unresolved. So what can you do if you find yourself dealing with someone who constantly plays the victim? First, recognize it for what it is. Pay attention to patterns. Does this person always end up being the victim in every story they tell? Do they avoid taking responsibility by focusing only on how hurt they feel? Do they twist situations so that you end up feeling bad for bringing up a problem? Once you see the pattern, set boundaries. Be kind but firm. Don't get sucked into endless guilt trips. You can say things like, "I understand that you feel upset, but we still need to talk about what happened." Or, "I hear that you're hurting, but that doesn't change the fact that this behavior needs to stop." And most importantly, trust your gut. If you constantly feel confused, guilty, or like you're walking on eggshells around someone, it's worth stepping back and asking yourself why. Playing the victim is one of the oldest tricks in the book when it comes to manipulation. But once you know how it works, you're in a much better position to handle it calmly and clearly without getting pulled into the drama. Remember, real accountability is a sign of strength, not weakness. And healthy relationships, whether they're with friends, family, coworkers, or partners, are built on honesty, responsibility, and respect, not guilt trips and blame games. Have you ever tried to have a serious conversation with someone, and no matter what you said, it felt like talking to a brick wall? Maybe their face went blank. Maybe they stayed silent. Maybe they gave you one-word answers, shrugged, or just stared at their phone like you weren't even there. That's called stonewalling. And wow, if you've ever been on the receiving end of stonewalling, you know just how absolutely maddening it feels. It's like trying to have a conversation with a robot that's been unplugged. No matter what you say, it's like nothing gets through. So, what exactly is stonewalling? Well, in simple terms, stonewalling is when someone completely shuts down communication. They stop responding, stop engaging, and stop participating in the conversation. It's not the same as needing a moment to calm down or stepping away to collect your thoughts. That's healthy. Stonewalling is different. It's used as a way to avoid responsibility, avoid accountability, or even control the situation by refusing to communicate at all. Think of it like this. You're trying to talk about a problem. Maybe something they did hurt your feelings. Or maybe you just need to clear the air. But instead of working with you to solve the issue, they shut down. They cross their arms, look away, stay silent, or maybe just leave the room altogether without saying a word. And suddenly you're left standing there, feeling completely alone, completely ignored, and completely powerless. And here's the thing. Stonewalling is not always loud or dramatic. In fact, it's often super quiet. It's the cold shoulder. It's walking away mid-conversation. It's saying, "I'm done talking about this," when nothing was actually resolved. It can look really subtle on the outside, but to the person on the receiving end, it feels like emotional torture. Now, you might be wondering, why do people stonewall in the first place? And the answer is, well, it depends. Sometimes people stonewall because they feel overwhelmed or flooded with emotion. They might not have the tools to handle difficult conversations, so their brain kind of goes into shutdown mode. This can happen in relationships where communication skills aren't very healthy. But in other cases, and this is really important to understand, stonewalling can be used as a deliberate tactic, a form of manipulation, a way of punishing or controlling someone without saying a single word. Right. Let's say you bring up a valid concern in a relationship, like maybe your partner has been ignoring your needs, or maybe a friend has been spreading rumors about you. Instead of owning up to it or working through the problem, they shut down. They stop talking. They act like you are the problem for even bringing it up. And suddenly you find yourself apologizing, just to get them to talk to you again. See how that works? That's manipulation. Stonewalling shifts all the emotional labor onto you. You end up feeling like you're begging for attention, begging for answers, begging for closure. Meanwhile, the person stonewalling gets to feel powerful and in control, all while avoiding responsibility for their actions. Now, not every case of stonewalling is done with bad intentions. Some people genuinely struggle with conflict. They might need time to cool down or process their emotions. The key difference is how they handle it. Healthy communication sounds like, "Hey, I need a little space to calm down, but I do want to talk about this later." Unhealthy stonewalling sounds like complete silence, disengagement, disrespect. It's also important to point out that stonewalling doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. It can show up at work, in friendships, with family, anywhere there's communication. Think about a boss who ignores emails when there's a problem, or a parent who refuses to acknowledge their child's feelings, or even a friend who gives you the cold shoulder instead of talking things out. That's all stonewalling. So what can you do if someone is stonewalling you? Well, first of all, stay calm. Reacting with anger usually makes it worse. If they need space to process, give it to them, but set clear boundaries. Let them know you're open to talking when they're ready, but it's not okay to just ignore issues forever. And if stonewalling becomes a repeated pattern, especially when used to avoid accountability or control you, that's a major red flag. Healthy relationships require communication. Real connection comes from working through problems, not avoiding them. At the end of the day, stonewalling might feel like silence on the surface, but underneath it speaks volumes about the health of the relationship. Whether it's done out of fear, avoidance, or manipulation, it leaves real damage behind. Being heard and respected is a basic human need, and no one deserves to feel invisible just because someone else refuses to have an honest conversation. Remember, communication is a two-way street, and if someone keeps building a wall instead of building a bridge, maybe it's time to ask yourself if that's really a road you want to keep walking on. Have you ever met someone new, and within just a few minutes, you catch yourself thinking, wow, we really click? Maybe they laugh when you laugh. Maybe they lean in when you lean in. Or maybe they start using words and phrases that sound a whole lot like the way you talk. That right there? That's called mirroring. Mirroring is this fascinating little social behavior where one person subtly copies or reflects the body language, tone, words, or even emotions of another person. And most of the time, we don't even notice it's happening. It's one of those things humans just naturally do when we want to build connection or feel closer to someone. Think about babies for a second. When you smile at a baby, what do they usually do? They smile back. That's one of the earliest forms of mirroring. It makes us feel safe. It makes us feel seen. And as we grow older, we keep doing it, but in much more subtle ways. You might notice it with close friends. Ever realize that you and your best friend have kind of the same laugh now? Or maybe you both start using the same weird little catchphrases. That's mirroring in action. Couples do it too. Spend enough time around someone, and you might even start picking up their gestures, their expressions, or even their accent. In normal, healthy relationships, mirroring happens naturally. It's usually unconscious. It's like a social glue that helps people bond. It says, hey, I'm like you. You can trust me. And most of the time, that's exactly what it is. A harmless, human thing that helps us feel connected. But here's where it gets a little tricky. Because while mirroring can be sweet and innocent, it can also be used as a tool for manipulation. See, some people, especially skilled manipulators, know exactly how powerful mirroring can be. And they use it very intentionally to win your trust, to lower your guard, and to make you feel like they totally get you. When really, they might just be using that connection to get what they want. Ever heard the phrase, they seem too good to be true? Sometimes that's exactly what's happening. Maybe it's a new friend, a romantic partner, or even a salesperson, and everything about them just feels perfect. They like the same music you like. They love the same movies. They even share the same childhood stories or life struggles. It almost feels like fate. But if you zoom out and pay attention, you might realize that they're reflecting everything back at you. Your values, your opinions, even your body language. And not because they genuinely feel that way, but because they know mirroring builds trust fast. This is common in toxic relationships, especially early on. A manipulative person might study you closely. They'll notice how you talk, how you move, what excites you, and what bothers you. Then they'll carefully reflect it all back at you to create this feeling of instant connection. And before you know it, you're thinking, wow, I've never met anyone like them before. But in reality, you've just met a very skilled mirror. Mirroring like this can feel really flattering at first. It feels like being seen and understood on a deep level. But here's a good way to tell if it's genuine or manipulative. Time. Real connection takes time to grow. If someone seems to become your perfect match overnight, that's a red flag. If they agree with absolutely everything you say, all the time, that's another red flag. And if their personality seems to shift depending on who they're with, that's a sign they might be mirroring people strategically instead of authentically. Of course, not all mirroring is bad. Most of the time, it's just part of being human. We mirror people we like. We mirror people we admire. We even mirror people when we're trying to comfort them, like matching their energy if they're sad or excited. But the key difference is intention. Healthy mirroring comes from connection. Manipulative mirroring comes from control. So if you ever feel like someone is mirroring you a little too perfectly, slow down. Watch how they act when you disagree with them. Watch how they behave when you're not giving them attention. And watch how consistent they are when they're around other people. Real people have their own thoughts, their own quirks, and yes, sometimes their own disagreements. Mirroring is one of those fascinating human behaviors that can either help build real trust or fake it. The good news is, once you know what to look for, you can spot the difference pretty easily. At the end of the day, the healthiest relationships are built not just on similarity, but on honesty, respect, and being real, even when that means being different. Because the best kind of connection isn't about seeing a perfect reflection of yourself. It's about being seen, accepted, and valued for who you really are. And no mirror can replace that. Have you ever been in a relationship, maybe with a partner, a parent, a friend, or even a boss, where everything feels great when you're doing exactly what they want, but the second you disappoint them, it's like they flip a switch and suddenly act like you do not even exist? That cold silence, that distance, that weird emptiness in the room, that is what people call love withdrawal. Love withdrawal is exactly what it sounds like. It is when someone who usually gives you attention, affection, or warmth suddenly pulls all of that away. Not because they are busy, not because they are upset in a healthy way, but because they are trying to control you or punish you for not doing what they want. And the wild thing is, it works, at least for a while. Humans are wired to crave connection, especially from people we care about. So when someone pulls their love away from us, it can feel like emotional whiplash. One minute, you are laughing together, feeling safe and close. And the next minute, you feel like you are standing out in the cold without a jacket, wondering what just happened. Love withdrawal can show up in all kinds of situations. Think about a kid whose parent gives them the silent treatment for days after they mess up, or a partner who suddenly stops saying "I love you," or giving hugs because of one disagreement, or a friend who ghosts you completely when you do not take their side in an argument. In every case, the message is the same. If you want my love, you better fall in line. Now here is what makes love withdrawal so sneaky and manipulative. The person doing it often does not have to yell or say anything mean at all. In fact, they might look totally calm on the outside. But the emotional impact hits just as hard, sometimes harder, because it triggers our deepest fear of abandonment. When people experience love withdrawal over and over, they start to feel anxious, confused, and desperate to fix things. And usually the fastest way to get the love back is to apologize, give in, or do whatever the other person wants, even if it goes against your own needs or values. It is like walking on eggshells all the time, trying not to upset them just so you do not have to feel that horrible loneliness again. But here's the thing, real love, healthy love, does not disappear like that when mistakes happen or when there is a disagreement. Healthy love allows space for two people to have different opinions, to set boundaries, and to work through problems without fear of being shut out emotionally. Love withdrawal, on the other hand, is not about healthy boundaries or taking space to cool down. It is about control. It is about power. And often it is about teaching you a lesson, not through honest communication, but through emotional punishment. People who use love withdrawal regularly are often very skilled at making it seem like you are the problem. If you bring it up, they might say things like, "I just needed space," or "You are too sensitive," or "If you hadn't done that, I wouldn't have to act this way." It can leave you doubting yourself and wondering if you are overreacting. But here is a little reality check. You are allowed to feel hurt when someone who claims to love you suddenly turns cold and distant. You are allowed to want communication instead of punishment. And you are definitely allowed to expect consistency and kindness from the people closest to you. The hard part is recognizing love withdrawal when it is happening, especially if you grew up around it or got used to it in past relationships. Sometimes it just feels normal, even though it should not be. But once you do recognize it, you get to make new choices. Maybe that means calling it out directly and saying, "Hey, I feel hurt when you shut me out like this." Maybe it means setting boundaries and refusing to chase after someone who is trying to manipulate you. And sometimes it means realizing that you deserve better, friends, partners, or family who love you without making their care feel like a reward you have to earn. At the end of the day, love should feel safe. Love should feel steady. Love should not disappear like a punishment every time you show up as your real imperfect self. And the more we understand tricks like love withdrawal, the easier it becomes to spot them, name them, and protect ourselves from getting caught in that unhealthy cycle. Remember, real love does not need control, it needs connection. And you deserve the kind of love that stays. Have you ever had someone ask you for a small favor, like a quick opinion on something, and you said yes, no problem? Then, not too long after, they came back asking for something much bigger, like a huge favor you never expected, and somehow you ended up agreeing to that too? You might have been caught in a psychological trick known as the foot-in-the-door technique. It's like when a salesperson approaches you in a store and says, "Hey, can you just check out this new product?" You think, "Sure, that's harmless." And now, before you know it, they're trying to sell you a $1,000 gadget. It's surprising how easy it can be to fall for these small steps that lead to much bigger commitments. But what's going on here? Why do we often find ourselves saying yes when we really should say no? It turns out that there's a very simple reason for this, and it's a part of how our minds work. We all like consistency. We feel more comfortable when our actions match what we've done before. So when we agree to a small request, we're more likely to say yes to a bigger one that follows, even if we didn't plan on it. This idea is called the foot-in-the-door technique, and it's something that shows up everywhere, whether in sales, marketing, or even in personal relationships. At its core, it's a psychological principle where a person is more likely to agree to a larger request after first agreeing to a much smaller one. The small step gets your foot in the door, and once it's in, it's harder to resist the next bigger request. You might be thinking, well, why is this such a big deal? It sounds harmless. The thing is, while it might seem innocent, this technique is used all the time in ways we don't even notice. Think about the last time a company offered you a free trial. It seemed like such a small thing, right? A free 30-day subscription to a service. But by the end of that month, you were probably locked into a paid plan without really thinking twice. It happens because we often underestimate how powerful those small commitments can be. Once we say yes to something small, it becomes much harder to say no to the bigger ask that comes right after. It's almost like setting a pattern. And once we start a pattern of agreeing, we feel the need to keep going with it. That's why this strategy works so well. Now, let's take a look at a real-life example to see how the foot-in-the-door technique really plays out. There's a famous study from the 60s by a psychologist named Jonathan Friedman. He asked people to put a small sign in their window that said, "Drive carefully." Most people agreed to this simple request. A few weeks later, he asked those same people if they would place a much larger, more intrusive sign in their yard, one that was about 4 times the size of the first one, and said the same thing. Surprisingly, a lot of them said yes. The idea is that by starting with something small and easy, Friedman made it more likely that people would say yes to something bigger. It's a technique that takes advantage of human psychology, and it's something we all fall for, often without realizing it. But why do we fall for this in the first place? Well, a big part of it has to do with the way our brains are wired. When we agree to something small, we start to see ourselves as helpful or cooperative. We don't want to break that image of ourselves, so when the bigger request comes, we feel compelled to stay consistent with that image. Our desire to appear consistent, especially in the eyes of others, often leads us to make decisions we might not have made if we thought it through more carefully. Another reason this works is that people tend to focus on the small request and ignore what might come after. When you're asked to do something small, like signing a petition or answering a few simple questions, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. But once that small commitment is made, it opens the door for the next request. And by then, you're already more invested in the process, making it harder to back out. So what can you do about it? The key takeaway here is to be aware of how small commitments can lead to bigger ones. Next time someone asks you for a tiny favor, take a moment to think about the bigger request that might follow. Ask yourself if you're comfortable with it before saying yes. It's not always easy, but being aware of this psychological trick can help you avoid falling into it. In the end, the foot-in-the-door technique isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just one of those little tricks that people and companies use to nudge you towards saying yes. But now that you know how it works, you can be a little more cautious and thoughtful about the requests you agree to. After all, sometimes saying yes to the small things can lead to much bigger commitments than you bargained for.